The former Prince, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has officially left Royal Lodge and will live in a home on Sandringham Estate in Norfolk. It comes as his brother speaks out on the Epstein scandal for the first time.
On the morning of March 19th, 2026, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, Duke of York, His Royal Highness, a man who was born into one of the most privileged positions in human history, stood in front of a 5-bedroom farmhouse on the Sandringham Estate in Norfolk. And by multiple independent accounts from sources speaking to the Mirror, the Daily Mail and Hello magazine, he completely lost it. Not disappointment, not quiet sadness, not the dignified resignation of a man who understands that consequences are consequences and that his have been a long time coming. A tantrum. That is the word that multiple sources, speaking independently to different outlets, chose to describe the reaction of a 64-year-old man who was once hosted at the world's most exclusive addresses, who once held the full ceremonial weight of the British monarchy behind his name, who once lived in a 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park, standing in front of a Norfolk farmhouse with pest control vans in the driveway and scaffolding half erected and the smell of damp in the air. He reportedly described it as pokey, as ramshackle, as entirely beneath him. He reportedly measured curtains. He reportedly reviewed renovation works with barely concealed horror. He reportedly made it absolutely clear to everyone present that he was not going quietly, that he was not accepting this, that this was not what he had been promised and not what he deserved. One source described him as visibly furious. Another used the word struggling to contain his emotions. Another, using the word that has defined the coverage of this story all week, said simply, tantrum. Today we are going to tell you the full story of what happened at Marsh Farm, what Andrew was looking at when he lost it, what he is leaving behind and why leaving it is costing him something that goes far deeper than property. What King Charles has decided and why the decision is final regardless of how many tantrums are thrown. What Princess Anne's role has been in ensuring the timeline does not slip again. What Sarah Ferguson's position now tells us about the support network that is collapsing around a man who has never learned to stand without one. What the Bahrain rumours actually mean and whether the palace would allow it. And what this entire episode reveals about a man who has been stripped of everything, titles, roles, reputation, property, and whose primary emotional response to all of it is anger that the new house has only 5 bedrooms. We are going to take our time because this story deserves it. So settle in and let's begin. Let's start with the property. Because you cannot understand the reaction without understanding what Andrew was looking at and what he was comparing it to in his own mind. Marsh Farm is a 5-bedroom farmhouse on the Sandringham Estate in Norfolk. By any reasonable measure available to any reasonable person watching this video, that description sounds like something to be grateful for. A private farmhouse on a royal estate in the English countryside, surrounded by some of the most beautiful agricultural landscape in the United Kingdom. 5 bedrooms, grounds, privacy, security that the Crown is paying to install and maintain, CCTV, a 6-foot perimeter fence, landscaping for seclusion, broadband infrastructure. By the standard of virtually anyone who has ever lived, worked or struggled in Britain, that is not a punishment. That is a very comfortable life. But Andrew is not comparing it to a normal life. He is comparing it to Royal Lodge. Royal Lodge is a 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park. 30 rooms, extensive private grounds, the kind of property whose physical presence communicates something specific and powerful every single morning when you wake up inside it. It tells you that you are not ordinary. It tells you that the world has been arranged to accommodate your importance. It tells you that whatever has happened in the news, whatever the headlines have said, whatever the palace has done to your titles and your roles and your reputation, you still live somewhere that says you matter. Andrew moved into Royal Lodge in 2003. He renovated it extensively over the following years, reportedly spending millions on improvements. He made it his. It became his identity in the most physical and tangible way that a building can become a person's identity, not just where he lived, who he was. When Charles began making clear that Royal Lodge should be vacated, that the 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park was needed for a working royal, specifically considered as a potential home for William and his family as they prepared for the responsibilities of the next reign. Andrew's response was not quiet acceptance, it was resistance. He explored legal options, he contested the arrangements, he delayed, he dug in, he fought every stage of every timeline for longer than anyone, including those inside the palace who were managing the situation, had expected, long enough that the resistance itself became a story, a symbol. Not of a man protecting his legal rights. Whatever residual rights he had were slim, and the institution's position was clear, but of a man who fundamentally could not process that the world had changed, that the architecture of his life, the addresses and the titles and the 30 rooms was being dismantled, and that no amount of resistance was going to reverse that process. If you are watching this channel for the first time and you want to follow this story, and the situation of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is one of the most significant and most revealing stories in the modern history of the royal family, please subscribe right now. We cover the royal family in the depth and detail these stories deserve. Hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, and every new video comes directly to you. Now let's talk about October 2024. Because that was the month that made the Marsh Farm visit inevitable. In October 2024, Andrew was stripped of his remaining royal titles and honours. The Buckingham Palace statement that accompanied the action was, even by the careful standards of palace communications, remarkably direct. It used the phrase serious lapses of judgment. It included a reiteration of King Charles's sympathy for victims and survivors of abuse. Palace statements are not written casually. They are drafted and reviewed and legally assessed and approved at the highest level. When the official statement about a member of the royal family includes the phrase serious lapses of judgment alongside a reiteration of sympathy for victims and survivors of abuse, that is not diplomatic language. That is an institutional verdict, measured, controlled, deliberate, and devastating in its clarity. Andrew continues to deny all allegations relating to his association with Jeffrey Epstein. He settled a civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre in February 2022 without admitting liability. Those are the legal facts and they deserve to be stated plainly, but his institutional position, his standing within the family that created him, the institution he served, the world that once organized itself around his importance, has been irreversibly altered. He holds no official titles, he carries out no patronages, he has no public role, he receives no income from the public purse in his own right. And the move to Sandringham is the physical embodiment of all of that. The reduction from 30 rooms to 5, the move from Windsor to Norfolk, the removal from the proximate geography of royal power to the distant geography of royal storage. That is what Marsh Farm represents, not a smaller house, the end of the story of Prince Andrew. The physical expression of an institutional verdict that has been building for years and is now complete. Let's talk about what the Marsh Farm visit itself revealed, because the details that sources have provided to journalists covering this story are specific enough to tell a complete psychological portrait. Andrew reportedly arrived at the property to inspect renovation progress. He measured curtains, he reviewed works, he assessed the scale of the rooms, and he found all of it, the size, the state, the scope, entirely inadequate for a man of his sense of his own importance. The pest control vans were the detail that attracted most attention in the reporting. Vehicles associated with a rodent issue or a potential rodent issue parked in the driveway of the property he was being asked to regard as his home. Whether the problem was confirmed or contained almost does not matter at the level of what the image communicates. A former senior royal, a man who once hosted heads of state, inspecting a farmhouse while pest control vehicles sit in the driveway. The scaffolding was still up. The renovation works were incomplete. The security infrastructure, the CCTV, the perimeter fencing, the surveillance systems the Crown has been installing, was not finished. He saw the property in its rawest, most unflattering state, and he responded with what those present described, consistently and independently, as fury, as barely contained emotion, as the spectacular displeasure of a man who had understood, intellectually, that this was coming but who could not, in the actual physical experience of standing in front of Marsh Farm, make his emotional reality catch up with the facts he already knew. Royal commentator and author Robert Jobson captured something important when he told Hello magazine that Andrew is making it clear to the King and to courtiers that he is not going quietly, not going quietly. 3 words that say more than a paragraph of explanation. Because what does not going quietly actually look like at this stage? Andrew has already lost the titles. He has already lost the official roles. The property battle at Royal Lodge, sir, is functionally over. Removal vans have been spotted, the timeline is confirmed, the handover is coming. The decision has been made by an institution that is not asking for his agreement. It is not a negotiation. His feelings about the outcome have no bearing on the outcome. And yet he continues to perform his outrage, to resist, to make the tantrum visible. Let's take a brief pause here. We are at the midpoint of this story, and the sections ahead cover the Sarah Ferguson dimension, the Bahrain question, what his daughter's silence actually signals, and the accountability question that sits at the heart of everything. If this story is resonating with you and you know someone who follows the royal family and would want to hear it told properly, please share this video with them now. It takes just a moment and it genuinely helps us reach more people. Thank you. Now let's talk about Sarah Ferguson, because the personal dimension of Andrew's situation is not simply institutional. It has a human centre that the property and title stories sometimes obscure. For decades, through the divorce in 1996, through the financial controversies, through the Epstein revelations, through every stage of the public unravelling, Sarah Ferguson was the constant. The one person who did not quietly step away. They divorced, but they continued to live together at Royal Lodge. She appeared on television and in interviews, defending him, maintaining the appearance of a united front, providing the one thing that the institution and the public were no longer offering. Someone who still believed in him, or at least someone who was still there. That arrangement always defied easy categorization. 2 divorced people living together in a royal property for nearly 30 years is not a conventional domestic arrangement, but it seemed to serve its purpose. And whatever its private dynamics, it gave Andrew something psychologically vital. The sense of not being entirely alone, multiple. Reports now suggest that dynamic has fundamentally shifted. Sarah is expected to vacate Royal Lodge as part of the same process that is moving Andrew to Sandringham. Their future living arrangements are not confirmed as joint. Some outlets have used language suggesting cooling loyalty, distance, a version of the relationship that is considerably less solid than the 30-year companion arrangement implied. If those reports are accurate, Andrew is not simply losing a house, he is losing the person who stayed when everyone else had left. He is facing his diminished future without the primary support system that made the previous losses navigable. And then, and this detail must be mentioned, because it appeared in coverage this week and it demands examination, there are reports suggesting that Andrew is now interested in dating again. Hold that thought for a moment. A 64-year-old man who has in the past year lost his remaining titles, his 30-room mansion, his official status, his public role, and potentially his most significant personal relationship, is reportedly considering entering the dating world. Either Andrew is so profoundly disconnected from his own circumstances that he genuinely believes romantic possibilities are his most pressing concern right now, which would suggest a level of denial that is almost clinical in its completeness. Or sources close to him are leaking this information deliberately for purposes that serve someone's agenda. Neither interpretation is flattering, but both are revealing, because what the detail actually tells us is something about the collapse of his support network. In the absence of the relationship that sustained him for 30 years, a man who has never truly learned to be alone is reaching for the idea of connection. That is human. It is also deeply telling about the state he is in. Let's talk about the Bahrain question, because it is not going away, and the recent tone of the reporting has shifted in ways that require attention. For months, there have been rumours that Andrew is seriously considering relocating to Bahrain. Earlier coverage treated this as idle speculation. More recent reporting frames it with something closer to seriousness. Sources point to his long-standing connections in the region, connections built during his years as the United Kingdom's trade envoy through business relationships that have always attracted controversy and always raised questions about the company he was keeping. The psychological logic of the Bahrain possibility is not difficult to understand. In Britain, Andrew cannot escape the story. Every property he lives in, every outing he makes, every glimpse caught by a photographer is filed under the same headline: disgraced former royal, stripped of titles, friend of Epstein. In Bahrain, that specific and suffocating narrative does not follow him with the same intensity. He would not be the disgraced prince. He would be a well-connected man with history in the region and informal prestige that survives the stripping of official titles. He could build some version of a life in which the story of what happened to him here is not the first and only thing anyone knows about him. If he goes, it means something profound. It means he has concluded that no version of a dignified life in Britain is possible, that the weight of what has happened to him here is too permanent and too public to escape within these borders. But here is the question the coverage is not fully sitting with. Would King Charles allow it? Think about the palace's perspective carefully. On one reading, Andrew in Bahrain solves a real problem. He is absent from the domestic media landscape. He is not generating negative coverage from Windsor or London. He is not in proximity to events or people he might embarrass. Out of sight, out of mind. But there is another reading. Andrew in Bahrain, with his network of business connections, his history of relationships that raised serious flags, his demonstrated willingness to engage with individuals whose associations were at minimum problematic. Is that a problem solved, or a problem relocated to a jurisdiction where the palace has no leverage and no oversight? The palace has spent considerable effort containing Andrew. Sending him to Bahrain might not solve the problem. It might simply make the problem invisible until it becomes significantly larger. That is the calculation Charles is being asked to make, and it is not a comfortable one. Now let's talk about the daughter's silence, because it is one of the most significant elements of this story, and it receives less attention than it deserves. Throughout everything, the title stripping, the Royal Lodge battle, the Marsh Farm reports, the Tantrum coverage, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie have said almost nothing publicly. Both have maintained a line of absolute discretion. Neither has defended him. Neither has condemned him. They have held their silence with a consistency and a discipline that, in private, must be costing them something considerable. Some reports have suggested that Eugenie has reduced contact with her father significantly, though that has not been confirmed by anyone directly involved. If accurate, it represents the most painful development in this entire saga. Because whatever your assessment of Andrew's conduct, the rupture between a father and his children is never a small thing. It is always, at its core, a tragedy. But here is what I find genuinely interesting about the daughter's approach. Their silence may actually be the most strategically intelligent response available to them in an impossible situation. By not defending Andrew publicly, they protect their own reputations from the inevitable association that comes with being seen to support him at this particular moment. By not condemning him publicly, they avoid the accusation of abandonment and maintain whatever private family connection may still exist. They are threading an extraordinarily narrow needle, and they are doing it without a media strategy, without a public relations apparatus, without the kind of announcement that would make the estrangement itself a story. That restraint is notable, and it is, in its way, a form of verdict, not a legal one, not even an intentional one, but real. When the people closest to you determine that silence is safer than speech on your behalf, that tells you something about where you stand. Now let's ask the question that this entire story demands. What does accountability actually look like for someone like Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? He has been stripped of his HRH style. His military titles are gone. His public role has been erased. His Royal Lodge lease is ending. He is being relocated to a significantly smaller property far from the centres of royal life. He receives no income from the public purse in his own name. He carries no official patronages. For a substantial portion of the public, that is sufficient. He has faced meaningful consequences within the bounds of what the monarchy can actually do to one of its own. He has not been charged with a crime. He settled a civil case. He has paid in status, reputation, property, and public standing. For another portion of the public, it is nowhere near enough. They point out that he still has accommodation on a royal estate, that security is still being funded, that Marsh Farm, the source of his Tantrum, would be considered extraordinary luxury by the vast majority of people living in Britain today. And there is a third position, less often spoken, but present. That Andrew's situation contains elements of genuine injustice, that he has been publicly condemned without a criminal verdict, that the civil settlement was not an admission of guilt, that whatever happened, he is entitled to some residual form of private life. I'm not going to tell you which of those positions is correct. These are questions that reasonable people assess differently. What I will tell you is what I find most revealing about the specific nature of the reaction at Marsh Farm. Not the anger itself. Anger at a life dismantled is entirely human. I would not expect any person, regardless of their culpability, to greet this kind of loss with serene acceptance. What is revealing is where the anger is directed. At the farmhouse, at the curtains, at the 5 bedrooms instead of 30, at the pest control vans in the driveway, at the square footage. That tells you where Andrew's attention is, not on the people whose lives intersected with his in ways that ended his public career, not on reflection, not on the question of what responsibility he bears and what the appropriate response to bearing it looks like. On the rooms, on the postcode, on the status markers being physically removed one by one. That is what the Tantrum reveals, and it does not inspire the sympathy that anger at genuine injustice might otherwise produce. Let's think through what comes next, because there are several realistic paths and each of them tells a different story about how this ends. The first path is quiet acceptance. Andrew moves to Marsh Farm. He settles into a significantly reduced private life. He maintains whatever family connections remain. He fades from public consciousness in the way the palace hopes. This is the cleanest outcome, not for Andrew necessarily, but for the institution and for everyone else who has been consumed by the management of his situation. The second path is continued resistance. Andrew never fully accepts his circumstances. Every few months, a new story surfaces. Displeasure about something at the farmhouse, another reported frustration. He remains a recurring problem that the palace cannot fully contain. The third path is Bahrain. After a period at Marsh Farm, he announces he is relocating abroad. He removes himself from the British media ecosystem. He builds whatever version of a life is available to him in the Middle East. The fourth path, and this is the one most observers consider most dangerous, is a rehabilitation attempt, an interview, a documentary, a bid to re-enter public life in some form. Given the history of Andrew's media appearances, this scenario ends in almost certain disaster. The 2019 Newsnight interview is a permanent reminder of what happens when Andrew believes he can control a public narrative. Which of those paths do you think is most likely? Drop your answer in the comments, because this community makes better predictions than most professional royal watchers, and I mean that sincerely. Let's end where this story finds its most human truth. A 64-year-old man, a farmhouse in Norfolk, pest control vans in the driveway, scaffolding not yet finished, 5 bedrooms instead of 30, and a fury directed entirely at the accommodation, not at the choices that produced the accommodation, not at the relationships that ended his public career, not at the conduct that stripped the titles and emptied the 30 rooms, at the farmhouse, at the curtains, at the size of the rooms. That is what Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has arrived at after 64 years. A man whose identity was so completely constructed around the external markers of importance, the title, the property, the role, the address, that when those markers are removed, what remains is not a person who has reckoned with his life. What remains is someone furious about the curtains. King Charles has drawn his line clearly. The institution comes first. The slimmed-down monarchy is not a preference, it is a policy, and no one, not even his own brother, is exempt from its logic. Princess Anne, by all accounts the most vocal institutional voice throughout this entire process, has been equally clear. Service is the point. Rooms are not the point. Titles are not the point. The work is the point. And if you cannot do the work, the rooms and the titles follow the work out of the door. Andrew will move to Marsh Farm. The Easter deadline will arrive. The renovation will complete. He will wake up one morning in a 5-bedroom farmhouse in Norfolk, and he will face the question that has been waiting for him for years. Who are you when the rooms run out? That is not a cruel question. It is the most important question a life can ask, and the answer to it, the real answer, worked out in private over the months and years ahead, is the only thing that determines whether the final chapter of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's story is one of reckoning or one of continued rage. The tantrum at Marsh Farm suggests we are not yet close to the reckoning, but it is still possible. The farmhouse is still there, and so somewhere beneath the fury is the man. Thank you so much for watching today all the way to the end. This is one of the most humanly complex stories in the modern royal family, and we are grateful to everyone who stayed with it all the way through. Before you go, 3 questions I genuinely want you to answer in the comments. Do you think Andrew will ever truly accept his new circumstances, or will he spend his remaining years fighting a battle that is already lost? Bahrain or Norfolk? Where do you actually think he ends up permanently? And is this accountability, or is it exile dressed up as consequence? Drop your answers below. We read every comment. And if you are not yet subscribed, please do it now. Click subscribe, turn on your notifications, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you. We will see you soon.